you're traveling to Canada during the winter, there could be a day when you're traveling in a snowstorm. Listen, I never thought I would see the day, but baby, the day had come. Anyways, this video is going to share with you my tips for managing travel to Canada during a snowstorm as somebody who has experienced that and as somebody who lives here. Let's get going. All right, so the first thing that I want to do, and I took my notes to make sure that I cover every single point, because winter is all fun and games until you have to really travel through a snowstorm or your flights are affected by snow, crazy wind, crazy weather, and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So first, we're going to talk about why this matters, right? And why it's important to know what to do and to know really where you are and how to approach the situation. And this applies to anywhere in Canada. I mean, Toronto, which has the biggest international airport in Canada, does not generally get a lot of delays or it's not really affected with that. But today, on the day when I'm recording this video, we had a situation where a lot of flights were canceled and delays, and there were delays because of a snowstorm, the first snowstorm, crazy snowstorm of the winter for this season. So the first thing is why this matters, right? Snowstorms are something that we experience in Canada regularly, but as I said, in some regions it's more frequent than others. I just came from Quebec, and in Quebec it's something that you can have during the winter, maybe every week, and people are used to that. But here in Ontario, specifically Toronto, we are not really used to that. So when we get a lot of inches of snow, today, I think the predictions was between 35 and 40 inches of snow, we need to take extra precautions because this is not something that we get that frequently. So when it comes to travel, this matters because you can have flight delays for flights coming in the city or in the country and flights going out of the country. So as you would imagine, the snow affects the visibility in the sky for the pilots, but even beyond that, for the staff on the ground, when the plane has to land, the runway needs to be the ice well enough to allow the planes to land safely. And if you have a huge snowstorm, it affects the staff that is working at on the runway. It can affect the towers, which have a role to play, in like communication, with the airlines and with the pilots. And it affects also just the ability for them to de-ice the ground, the runway, to allow for a safe landing. So those kind of things, when you take that into consideration, you understand why there could be flight delays and in some instances flight cancellations. So sometimes it's like, the conditions are just not optimal for us to land given how we're seeing how it's going to progress, and so it's just wiser and safer for everybody for the flights to be cancelled. Unfortunate, yes, but better safe than sorry, right? The second reason why it matters is because the snowstorms can also affect ground transportation, so it can cause ground transportation disruption. So let's say that you are traveling, your flight was able to land, right? You landed safely, but when you come here, it might take you 2 times longer to get to your final destination in Toronto or in Canada compared to if there wasn't a snowstorm. Why? Because buses are delayed, trains are delayed, taxis, Ubers, everything is delayed because there is snow on the ground. And even like when there are like a lot of snowy conditions, there are alerts about how you should drive, and even in general, the transport authorities even recommend not to even be outside unless you absolutely need to, because there's a high risk of accidents. Because why? The roads are icy and you cannot really drive how you will drive on a non-icy road, even if you have winter tires. Today specifically, on the day this video was recorded, by around early afternoon, the police had already received calls and reports of about 60 to 70 accidents having happened on the road, right? And when I talk about early afternoon, I'm talking about around like 12 p.m. and just in Toronto. So this can become a hazard very quickly, and you want to be safer than sorry. So what would take you normally 1 hour to 2 hours can end up taking 3 to 4 hours of commute. And even for the trains. And another thing is, sometimes it might not even be that your train is delayed if you are taking like public transportation, but it might be that the train ahead is delayed and therefore it's causing a backlog of a delay. The third reason why it matters is because there can be airport chaos. Listen, with all these delays, just imagine the airport staff, first of all, having to manage now these situations of people's flights being cancelled, people's flights being rescheduled. That is already like high pressure situation. Then think about the bags, right? If the flights are cancelled and rescheduled, then you need to know how to manage the bags as well. So bags can be lost, bags can be damaged in transportation. I remember once my bag came back, it wasn't damaged. I have always had great travel experiences at the Toronto Pearson Airport and the Toronto Billy Bishop Airport, which is downtown. But when my bag came back, so I've always had great experiences, but when I traveled through a snowstorm, my bag came back and it was like very cold, because why? It's very cold and it's very snowy outside. But also it took longer for us to clear our bags, because everything is just delayed. The staff has to be very careful when they're walking, when they're driving those little cars on the runway to pick up the bags. So everything is just delayed because of the ground conditions, and we have to be understanding of that. Now, these are reasons why this matters, and I already mentioned some of the challenges that even come with just like the whole process of flying, of traveling during the snowstorm. But I want to add a few more. In addition to missed flights, you can also have missed connections, which, align with missed flights, where, if you have a multi-city flight, coming in Toronto or coming in anywhere in Canada, even if your first flight is on time, your second flight might be delayed. For example, if let's say you are going to Quebec and you were coming to Toronto first, if there's a snowstorm in both Toronto and also in Quebec, then in Toronto it might not be as severe as in Quebec. So you might make it in Toronto, but for you to go to Quebec where there is a bigger snowstorm, your flight can be delayed, and then so you might also miss your connection there. In addition, I mentioned the luggage delays, meaning that challenges in getting your bags, because it just requires a lot more logistics. It requires a lot more effort and a lot more coordinations under stranger circumstances. So those things can happen. And then another thing also that I made allusion to when I was talking about the road, well, I didn't make allusion to that, but it's a good way to get into that point. Because of the roads conditions, even when it comes to driving on the ground, you can have taxi shortage, meaning that it can take you longer to get a taxi, at the airport, or to even get an Uber. Why? Because the road conditions are not optimal for them to drive. And a lot of, people are focused on really like being safe on the road. Let me tell you something. This, like, it can be very strenuous, especially on resources, because it just makes it very difficult to ambulate, to move, to work, to drive. And a lot of people are just thinking about being safe on the road and not really getting out unless you absolutely have to. Today, for example, there was a lot of cancellations. Like, schools were canceled in some districts because they had to think about not just students coming to school, their parents dropping them, but also the school bus, doing the usual commute that the school buses had to do, and also them going back home, So even if when you're coming to school, the snow conditions are not so severe, when you are going back home, it might be a different story. This actually reminds me of in Dominica, sometimes when they have tropical depression or tropical storm watch, right? They sometimes, depending on the level of alert that you have, they might decide to not cancel work, but say work from home, or at least cancel school, because some people coming from further regions, it's harder for them to ambulate to get to the town. And for them to go back home, it might be a different situation, because you have congested roads, everybody trying to rush. And so sometimes it's just usually the wisest approach, and for the safety of everybody, and also to avoid frustration, avoid time wasted, and just to also be more efficient. So what are some tips that I have when it comes to traveling through a snowstorm? First, let me take a sip of my tea. Green tea. I wanted to be cozy when I'm recording this video, because I'm like, listen, I don't want to, what is this snowstorm? It means like home and cozy. The time is for coziness. We want to be cozy. We want to be cool, cutesy at home. And I'm like, yeah, let's stay warm. Let's stay cozy. And that's why I'm having my tea also. I do need it to stay warm. So, sorry guys, it feels so good. So travel tips, if you're traveling to Canada and then there's a prediction that a snowstorm might be happening unexpectedly or might be escalating, before you travel, right, you want to make sure that if you are able to change your flight, pick a direct flight, because when you have direct flights and you have lesser layovers, you have lesser chance of flight disruption. The other thing that I want to say is you want to make sure that you pick a flight that leaves very early in the morning. The reason I say this is because generally, from what I've observed, when we have snowstorms warning, right, the conditions worsen throughout the day. So if you really need to get to Canada on that day, this is applicable to Canada or any other country where it snows, but the video is for Canada. So if you get to Canada, but if you really need to get to Canada, obviously that's why you're traveling, pick a flight or change your flight to a flight that leaves early in the morning, because then in the morning they tend to also have clearer, better visibility, and the conditions are a lot better. And I've seen that people who travel, like the flight delays start to happen from like flights that are supposed to leave in the early afternoon until the evening. So you really want to make sure that you get a flight that comes early in the morning. If you can change it, do it accordingly. The next thing is make sure you have enough buffer time for travel if you have a layover. So if you have a multi-city layover, make sure that the connecting flights have enough time in between them, because if you don't and then the one flight is affected, then it can just throw off your entire itinerary. The third thing that I want to mention is you need to make sure that you get travel insurance. It is true that airlines can compensate you based on if your flights are cancelled or delayed, or if you experience flight disruption, but there are terms and conditions applied, and one of them is if it's like a force of nature, natural disaster, or environmental factor that the airline has no control over, like a snowstorm, you probably not get compensated. They might make sure to accommodate you with like no rebooking fee or putting you in a hotel or giving you meals, but you might not get compensation. And if you already have like activities planned on site, hotels booked in Canada, you want to make sure that you still are able to get your money's worth and not lose that money. So having travel insurance is really, really key when you're traveling in the winter in Canada, because you just never know what can happen. But with travel insurance, you can actually get refunded or you can get compensated if there are any delays at any point of your travel. You can get refunded or compensated for your accommodation, for your activities, bag loss, bag delays, meals, expenses, and so forth. So I really recommend, if you're traveling to Canada in the winter, get travel insurance, because you just never know when the conditions are going to change, and it's just better to be safe than sorry, right? Another thing that I have told you, I took my notes because I want to make sure I cover all the points, okay? You want to make sure that you pack your essential warm items in your carry-on. I mentioned earlier that you can have flight delays and baggage delays baggage delays as well, but you still want to make sure that when you arrive in Canada, you have things to keep you warm. So I would say first you need to travel with your parka, right? The airport itself is not cold, but when you get outside of yours, it's going to be cold. Me generally, when I travel back to Canada, because I kind of like know the system and know how I move around and know my outside transit time, I usually just travel with my park. I usually have my parka on me so that it doesn't go in my bag and it doesn't add extra pounds. I don't literally wear the parka. When I get on the plane, I just put it in the overhead compartment if there's space, or I just keep it on me, like on my legs, so that I can have it when I land. Because if there is if it is a delay with your baggage, then you're not gonna get it. And if they tell you come back for your baggage at the airport, in the evening or the next day, what you gonna do? You need your parka, your winter coat, right? So you want to make sure that you have it with you when you're traveling. You want to make sure that you're wearing your winter boots, with good grip, appropriate for the snow. Because there are some boots that they are cute, they are pretty, but they might, if you use them, you walk with them, you will fall. I'm telling you, you will fall. If your boots don't have good grip, you can actually buy, in French we call it crampon. You can buy it online, or you can buy it at some supermarkets here in different cities in Canada. That's available as well. Like you can just attach like the grip for the boot at the bottom, and then it can protect you from like sliding and falling. So in your carry-on, on you, your coat, your winter coat, your winter shoes, you want to travel just warm. Your leggings, your merino wool or fleece lined leggings, you want to have them. Your gloves, you want to have them in your handbag or in your carry-on. Your ear covers, your beanies, you want to have all those things in your carry-on, so that if your bag is delayed, at least you have items to keep you warm and you don't need to spend extra money. You also want to get your scarves, your winter scarves, all those things. One more thing that I want to add is your hands and feet warmer. People who are not used to winter like that, or not used to the type of temperatures that Canada offers for winter, they might feel a little bit thrown off. But the hands and feet warmers are very useful. I usually buy mine at Dollarama, yes. And when people come and visit me, I just get them hands and feet warmers. It's very cheap. You can get it between $3 and $4, and then one pack can last you for like 2 or 3 days. So when you come, you can stop at the Dollarama close to where you live or close to where you're staying in Canada, and then you can just use that. Or you can order yours online on Amazon. I know that there are rechargeable hand and feet warmer that you can use. If you want recommendations, I'm going to drop a link in the description box of this video as well. You can buy that. And basically what happens is that when you put your hand warmers in your gloves, right, automatically it activates. When you put it in your shoes, automatic in your socks, like in your shoes, either in your socks or between the socks and the shoes, it automatically activates. And it's useful when you're walking outside and you want to stay warm. It really, really makes you feel good and fuzzy and nice, all nice inside. So yeah, that's essentially it when it comes to your thermal layers, what to pack in your carry-on, what to travel with you, not in your suitcase, with you, so that we can have it when you land and when you arrive in the city. Now I want to share some tips for you with you for when you are arriving at the airport, right? You need to make sure that you come earlier than planned. So if you were supposed to be at the airport 2 hours before your flight for an international flight, then I recommend being there 4 hours before, honestly. Be there at least an hour extra or 2 hours extra, because conditions can change really quickly. Like, you might be saying, okay, you know what, I'm gonna leave 2 hours before, but by the time you get to the airport, either there's like a really long line of people who are maybe trying to rebook their flights for the situation, or you might even experience challenges on your end. So you want to make sure that you get there earlier, so that if there is any adjustment that needs to be done, that you are actually able to do it with minimal flight disruptions. You also want to make sure that you stay close to your gate when you get to the airport, wherever you're leaving, whether it's in Canada or in the US, before your flight to Canada. Make sure you stay close to your gates, because gate changes can happen quickly. And we know this happens a lot, even outside of a snowstorm. So you don't want to make it a little bit more complicated by not being close and just like wandering around and missing important information. Another thing is, it's important for you to also know when you're arriving. So when you're arriving to Canada, what are the conditions at the airport, right? Generally on the plane, the staff will, the hostesses, the flight attendants, sorry, they will tell you what the conditions are. And when you are arriving in Canada, you might also experience delays in transit. So like I said earlier, some distances that usually take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it might take an hour. I personally experienced that taking the UP Express train from the Toronto Pearson Airport to the Union Station, which is downtown Toronto, and which I recommend if you're traveling to Toronto and you are staying downtown. Do that instead of taking an Uber. So the UP Express train takes you 25 minutes to get from the airport to downtown Toronto, which is Union Station, and to Union Station, which is downtown Toronto. And the trains arrive every 15 minutes. But with the snowstorm, what happened was, the trains were delayed because the train line is shared between different other trains within the city. And so if those trains are delayed by the snow, then the UP Express will also be delayed. So the train was taking longer, the commute distance was taking longer, and the train was coming now every 30 minutes instead of every 15 minutes. So that can affect your plans when you are arriving, and it's important to just be aware of that and be flexible. All right. But if you're not taking the train, if you're taking an Uber, I recommend just making sure that the Uber has winter tires. And personally, I wouldn't recommend the Uber, honestly, if you are traveling in a snowstorm, because really the road conditions are not optimal. I would recommend taking either public transportation or figuring out if there's a train route or if there's bus routes for you to get to where you need to get to. Because driving, again, it can just be a little bit chaotic, especially with rideshare drivers. And you can also face a lot of traffic. But if you had a car, if you really cannot do without taking an Uber, or if you had planned to drive, meaning you had rented a car, just double check with a car rental agency, that company, that they have snow tires. Because sometimes those car rental companies will play you, they'll be like, yeah, we have, or they will probably cancel your reservation because a lot of people are requesting cars now. So just make sure that you have snow tires, and make sure that when you are on your car rental contract, you're adding an insurance policy if you don't have one, because again, driving in the winter in Canada is different. I experienced that when I was in Quebec. I live in Ontario, and winter is good, but it's not as wild as in Quebec. Driving in the winter in Quebec is different from driving in the winter in Ontario. Literally two different provinces. It's essentially, I'm saying, driving in the winter in Montreal or in Quebec City is different than driving in the winter in Toronto. So it's just different, and you just want to make sure that you have all precautions in place, because it's not the same. It's not the same. But yeah, I wanted to share those tips with you. Traveling in the winter and experiencing a snowstorm, it's part of the experience. If you can avoid having that, because it can lead to some frustrations, then do. But if you really can't avoid because you need to travel expeditiously, you have plans already that cannot be changed and stuff, then take it as part of the experience, and do your best. Use the tips in this video to help plan your trip, avoid frustration. be flexible, and end up enjoying your experience. But yeah, I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know if you have any plans of traveling to Canada this winter, and also let me know if you have experienced a snowstorm in the past while traveling. And if you love this video, you will definitely, I think definitely love the video where I talk about the realities of traveling to Quebec, because I know Quebec is one of our top winter destinations here in Canada. And also, if you also love the video where I talk about the things that surprised me about Quebec when I went around the holidays, and trust me, it is flabbergasting. Thank you for watching. Welcome if you're new here. Make sure you subscribe. My name is Fana, and I share more about traveling around the world, and it's including Canada where I live. And yes, I still need to work on that outro. I probably need to sit down and think about what I want to say in that outro, but for now, this is the video. Thank you for this month. I'm posting a video every single day as a challenge for my business coach, but also because I love yapping, as you can tell, and I have a lot to say. So yeah, see you tomorrow for the next video. Bye.